Okay, good afternoon. Thank you. Okay. And I left it upstairs.
Do you want me to go get it?
Yes, Annabelle, thank you. Tell us what's in the printer. I make my own list of what they've tested over the past. Mine goes back decades. Thank you, Juan. And I printed it out because I have a lot of detail in it, and then I forgot to bring it down. It's been one of those days. So because I know that most of you are here because you want the predictions, right? And some of you are going, I don't want to know. And I will talk to you about what I think. There are some pretty obvious things and then some not so obvious things. Let's talk a little bit about essay writing, and hopefully I'll get my list when Annabelle comes back. As you know, let's back up a second, because I say as you know. Let's make sure that we know that on the first day of the exam, Tuesday, right? 2-day exam, I don't think that's any surprise, to the last Tuesday and the last Wednesday in February, always. And on Tuesday, we have the Florida Day. For the past, wow, I can't even tell you how many years now, they have had 3 essays in the morning and then 3 multiple choice components in the afternoon. That's not guaranteed because they could switch things up. I don't think they will, but I just want to let you know that if you walk in and, for example, when I took the exam, we had 4 essays and 2 multiple choice components. I don't think they're going to go back to 4 essays because, quite frankly, it takes them so long to grade 3 essays. But just be aware, you got to roll with the punches when it comes to the Florida portion of the exam. So 3 essays in the morning and 3 multiple choice components in the afternoon. Now, the morning you walk in, and they're going to hand you a packet with the 3 essays. When they tell you go, you can do the essays in whatever order you like. You do not have to do them in a specific order. So the best idea probably is to take a look at all 3 right away. And I expect your commercial courses will be telling you the same thing. Take a look quickly to see what they are so that you can decide which you want to do when. And then it's individual. You have to know, do you like to, stick your toe in the water and wade in? Or do you like to just jump into the deep end? Know whether you should do the easy question first or the hard question first. Know that about yourself. I can't tell you what the right answer is there, whatever works for you. But I can tell you this, 1 hour per essay, regardless. So if you could be the person, every exam there is going to be somebody who picks up the packet, looks at a question and goes, thank you, thank you, thank you, because it's exactly what you wrote your senior writing requirement on, or it's exactly what you researched for your boss, or exactly what your moot court problem was. It happens for there's somebody out there, and maybe you guys are going to be lucky. But even if you're that person, and you get the question, and you know it inside out, 1 hour. Even if you could write for 3 hours on that one question. It's different from your law school exams. On your law school exams, if your professor has more than 1 essay, or as I do, 1 question but multiple parts, a student does well on 1 part, runs out of time on the second. Sometimes you can kind of make adjustments. They cannot on the exam because each essay is graded by somebody different. So if you do 2 hours on question number 1 and do a really good job, the maximum number of points you can get is 100. If you leave 5 minutes or even 15 minutes for question number 3 and get a 5, it doesn't balance out, right? So 1 hour per question, and you need to time yourself and you need to practice that way. So as you are going through, it's a little early to be writing essays, to be honest, soon, but it's a little bit early because, especially for the essays, you have to know the Florida stuff. But as you practice 1 hour per question. And we'll be talking about the technique as we get into the 2 questions today. Resist the temptation to just do an information dump. And you've all learned by now that it's all about the analysis. Have pity on your graders, because there could easily be somebody sitting here who's going to end up being a grader. I wouldn't want to wish that on my worst enemy, to be honest. The graders are people who took the exam a few years ago and who did well on the exam. That's the reward that you get for doing well. You have to grade essays. Thank you, Annabelle. Thank you. Yeah, and we've had graders with a fair amount of frequency. Thank you so much. From St. Thomas. So anybody who does well, and if they ask you to grade, you can't say no. You can't say no to the bar. You just got to admit it. You got to do what they tell you. Each grader gets 300 essays to grade in a very short period of time. So be kind to your grader. You know, I always tell students, make me smile when I'm grading. Don't make me scowl or be angry, because the grader doesn't have a lot of time to spend with your essay. And how do you make the grader smile? You have an answer that is to the point. You have to show your analysis. You know you have to do that, but it doesn't have a lot of fluff. It doesn't have a lot of negative issue spotting. You don't rewrite the facts. You know, all the stuff that you already know. And it answers the call of the question. You're going to see with these Florida essay questions, particularly in the last 10 years or so, they use what we call the new style of essay writing: short, to the point, clear call of the question. Answer the call of the question, no more, no less. And you will maximize your score. And it's kind of what I call the nod-along theory. You want your essay, if we take these, and I'm sorry, it's so cold in here, and so if you hear me kind of, I can hear it in my voice, it's because I'm so cold. Hopefully I'll warm up as we go along. Here's your essay, here's the grading essay. You want the grader to just be going check, 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 check. How do you do that? By outlining before you start to write. So important. And as one of the main things that I want to kind of get across in the essay writing sessions that we do is how you organize their questions. I want to give you a game plan, if you will, for the topics. And the more you know before you go in, if it's a contracts question, I'm going to write it this way. If it's a Florida con law question dealing with bonds, I'm going to write it this way. The more you have a game plan, the easier it's going to be for you to get it done in an hour, and the closer you're going to get to the grading outline, which is how you're going to maximize your points. Now, remember I said your grader is somebody who just recently took the exam, and you're thinking, well, how can that person, doesn't necessarily know, all that law? Because believe me, once you're done with the exam, it's gone. The grader has a grading outline prepared by the person who wrote the question. The person who wrote the question is not grading. The person who wrote the question probably lives in another state. I've written questions for bar exams in other states. I've never written for Florida because they don't want Florida, especially Florida law professors, to write questions for the Florida exam. But you write the question and you write a grading answer to go with it. And you give them general parameters in terms of points. Now, what happens next, though? Really important part of the process. After you all write your exams and turn them in, they have what they call calibration sessions. The graders all come together for a weekend. They lock them up. And they get a sampling of exams to grade. Now, I've actually participated in a calibration session. It was a mock one because we took an exam that had already been administered. But we did exactly what the graders do, so I know how the process works. So they lock you up and you sit around for a weekend grading. You get about 40 exams to grade. And you sit there with the grading outline. And you grade accordingly. And you make notes as you go along. Point number 5 on the grading outline, everybody got it and everybody got it right. Point number 3, nobody got it. Point number 7, everybody got it, but they wrote a lot more than what's in, or a lot less. And everybody wrote about this point that's not in the grading outline. You make these notes, and then they come back together, and that's when they do the calibration session. And they say, we go through the outline, the point allocation for this topic is correct, the point allocation for that topic should be increased or decreased, we should strike this particular point because nobody talked about it and really it's not all that relevant. We should add this topic because everybody wrote about it and it is important. Once they have finished the calibration session, they are locked in, and that's the most important thing for you to know. The grader, to achieve uniformity in grading, because remember, each grader is going to get 300 essays, but you're going to have a lot more than that on the exam. To achieve uniformity, the graders cannot vary from the grading outline. You know, when I'm grading an exam, it's my own exam, and I see a student kind of go off in a direction, I say, wow, you know, that's kind of interesting. I think I need to give that student credit for being creative. They can't do that. If what you write is in the grading outline, you get the points. If what you write is not in the grading outline, you get no points and you just wasted all that time and space and effort. So it is really important, again, to try to get your answer to where it should be, focusing in on that call of the question. That's how you maximize your points. And you don't torture your reader. You know, you get to the point, you show enough, but you don't overdo it. Just like, you know, sometimes first-year law students just want to tell you everything because, wow, I learned something, I want to tell it. You can't do that on the bar exam either. You know, answer the question and don't fill. Now, what are you going to see in the essay portion of the exam? Well, I want to back up first and talk about the multiple choice portion, even though we're not doing Florida multiple choice today. You will have 100 multiple choice questions in the afternoon, unless they change it, but I don't think they will. 90 of those multiple choice questions will count. 10 are considered experimental. That's how they scale, or at least their initial scaling in Florida. And those 90 multiple choice questions will be divided approximately into 3 segments, 3 equal segments of approximately 30 each. One segment will be the rules of civil and criminal procedure, Florida rules of civil and criminal procedure. That's one segment of 30. Now I say one segment will be. There's only one subject that must be tested on the Florida portion of the bar exam, the rules of civil and criminal procedure. They must test those rules. Interestingly, I've read the rules carefully, the rules do not require those the Civ and Crim Pro to be tested in multiple choice form. Interesting. But I'm going to tell you that they have never tested those rules in anything but multiple choice form. And I cannot imagine that for the purposes of this exam that they would change it. So again, out of your 90, 30 approximately will be Civ/Crim Pro. 2 other multiple choice components then, if they are true to form. They don't have to tell you if they're going to change that, but I doubt that, very seriously doubt that they would change it. Those 2 components have been drawn for many years, since the 90s, so that's a long time now, from the following 3 subjects: evidence, wills administration, and business entities. They are not required to test evidence, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted this printed out. I think it was the time before last. I can't, wherever it went. I think it was last February, if I'm remembering correctly. They did not test evidence, but they tested wills administration and business entities.
The question, by business entities, you mean everything, agencies,
Everything.
associations, partners?
Yep, all that stuff. all that stuff. And I'll get back to that, but yes, in the generic, it's everything. So again, I think it was last February, they tested wills administration and business entities and no evidence. So, however, they usually do test evidence. So we're going to have a session where we're going to include Florida evidence distinctions. Which means then that usually what they do is have wills administration and evidence or business entities and evidence. And last July, they tested wills administration and evidence. If I were you, I'd be well prepared for business entities. And I'll explain, there's another reason why I think it's more likely business entities, but don't ignore wills administration. Because all that wills stuff, if they don't test it in multiple choice, can still show up in the essay. So you got to know it. And I, as much as I wish I could tell you cut corners here, cut corners there, they're making it harder and harder for you to cut corners. It's the reality of it. But again, on the multiple choice, you're likely to have approximately 30 Civ/Crim Pro, approximately 30 evidence, and then if I'm rolling the dice, I would say 30 business entities. Now the question is, business entities, what does that mean? Sometimes they mix it up. Sometimes it's just partnership. Sometimes it's just corporations. A few exams ago, it was just charitable corporations. Nonprofits. They had 30 questions on nonprofits. So you got to know all that stuff. Any questions on the multiple choice, first of all? One final comment on it, and again, we're coming back to Florida multiple choice later. Everything that you have learned and that you're learning about answering multiple choice questions for the MBE, really valuable technique. Forget about it when it comes to Florida. Probably people, I'll get you in a second, Yvette, people have probably told you the Florida questions are really bizarre. They are not written in the MBE style, the Florida multiple choice questions. And it's how many days for this, how many hours for that, and my understanding is also that they use obscure DCA cases for their fact patterns, and you know it or you don't. So just understand that it's mostly memorization when it comes to Florida multiple choice, and those test-taking techniques that are so important for the MBE, they really don't help you with Florida multiple choice. Yvette, your question.
You didn't mention the family law. Is that family
That's coming. That's coming. That's coming. Now, remember I told you for the multiple choice, for probably close to 20, maybe more than 20 years, you've had just those 3 subjects tested in multiple choice in addition to civil and criminal procedure. They can change it without telling you. They could take a subject that has been tested in essay, like family law, for these many years, and they could all of a sudden test it in multiple choice. For example, back in the early 90s, I think it was early 90s, late 80s, they added, first it was just corporations and eventually business entities. They added that topic, and for a few years they tested it in essay form only. And then one exam people showed up and it was a bunch of multiple choice questions instead of essay. They don't have to tell you if they're changing the testing format. They do have to tell you if they're adding new subjects, which of course they did a few exams back, but they do not have to tell you if they're changing the testing format. So be aware, because if you walk in and you see an essay on the rules of civil procedure, don't freak out. Or if you walk into the afternoon and you see a multiple choice component, family law, don't freak out. They could do it. They aren't likely to, but they could. Be aware of that. And family law is one that I've often thought if they wanted to shake things up, that's where they could change it, because you have family rules of court which they could test. You know, again, just be, and things like the UCC JEA, you could do all sorts of multiple choice questions on that stuff, the jurisdictional stuff. So, you know, it's like any sport, you know, keep on your toes, don't get back on your heels, be able to adapt and change if you need to. So now, essays. Everything else that Florida requires could be tested in essay. Nothing is required to be tested in essay, and nothing other than those rules of civil and criminal procedure is required. Once upon a time, Florida constitutional law was required. They changed that a few years back, and it's number one on my list because it's been off the exam, and I don't know if I can read it properly. Florida con law has been off the exam for, I think, 3 times now. So this printed out kind of funky. They have not tested it since February 2014. So we've got 3 exams that it's been missing. So Florida con law, you want to know. And in a few weeks, I guess the end of January, if I'm remembering correctly, Judge Shepard will do his presentation. Make sure, if you can't make all the sessions, make sure you come to that session. Even if you had Florida con law, it's a really great review. He reviews the substance and he talks a lot about how they're likely to test Florida con law. Plus, I will do a separate Florida con law essay component in one of my classes because it's so important. So, number 1 on the list is Florida con law. What else do I think they're likely to test in essay form now? Now, understand, usually I'm really accurate. Last time I wasn't. I'll have to admit, I wasn't. I was disappointed in myself. But the examiners know what we do to predict. You know, they know we all make our own little lists. And they like to test around our predictions. But with that in mind, I think trusts is a really good possibility. Trusts was tested in July, but not in July, excuse me, in February, but it wasn't tested in July. And except for one time, if they test wills administration in multiple choice, they don't test trust in essay form, and vice versa. Well, they did wills administration last time, and I'm kind of thinking trust is due. So I think you'll see a trust essay, which tends to be standalone. When I say standalone, a single topic, remember, they can test up to 3 subjects per question now, which makes my predicting job a lot more difficult as well. But I think a Florida con law question, which could be combined, homestead, for example, can be combined with property. Homestead can be combined with trusts. Florida con law combines with a lot of things. I've even seen them combine it with contracts, if you can believe that. There's an old question involving aluminum siding. It's contracts and Florida con law, contracts clause issue. So be aware, again, Florida con law, I think trusts, I think is a good possibility. From there, some kind of commercial law is going to show up. When I say commercial law, either commercial paper or secured transactions. They are more overdue on secured transactions than commercial paper. So I'm kind of thinking secured trans will show up, which combines, usually they've combined it with contracts. It could combine even with property. It could combine with other things. But I think I would be prepared for those. And if you did not have either secured trans or commercial paper, please, 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 next Friday is the session that Professor Martin is going to do. She does a great review, and again, she does a great job of showing you how they're likely to test. So important, because you do not want to give those points away. So, Florida constitutional law probably combined with something. Trust could be standalone, or maybe if it's got a homestead issue kind of thrown in, combined with Florida con law. What else? Maybe family law. I don't know. That one's kind of like, that's a maybe. Contracts they have tested to death in the February 2015 exam. They had 2 contracts questions. 2. They've never done that before. But they've been testing contracts a lot. So I doubt that you'll have standalone contracts. Could be mixed, though. Contracts mixes with everything. They tested torts and property fairly regularly too. So I'm not looking for a standalone on them, but maybe again mixed. The other thing that they tested on all 3 questions last time was professional responsibility. So make sure that you know the Florida rules of professional responsibility and the judicial conduct code as well, because they have been testing that more and more. What else? Little bit of sleeper. 2 things, 2/3 things that are sleepers that have been showing up again because they're trying to keep you a little off balance. Last exam had a federal constitutional law question. And tomorrow you're going to get a lecture, short, sweet, and to the point, but still, nevertheless, a really good lecture from Professor Kang about First Amendment, and he'll talk to you about essay writing. They go through these periods where they do test federal con law. They could be in one of those periods. So federal con law could show up, and criminal procedure. Yeah. When I say criminal procedure, federal criminal procedure, of course, 4th and 5th Amendment stuff. They tested that last time, but they've tested it with more frequency lately. And they had a little bit of Florida criminal law thrown in as well. They have not had a standalone Florida criminal law essay since the early 80s. It's a long time ago. I can't imagine that you're going to get a standalone criminal law question, but can they tuck a little criminal law question in various places? Yes. They've combined it in the past. Well, they did this last time with Crim Pro. They can combine it with torts. Got someone who commits a battery, criminal battery, tort battery. So they've been sneaking it in. Now, one final comment, and perhaps it's because I don't know the subject matter as well. They said on this past exam, the bar examiners, labeled that criminal law, criminal procedure question, they put juvenile delinquency in the label. But there's nothing in the question about somebody being young. And I read it, and I read it again last night. And I like I say, I could be missing something, but I didn't see any delinquency there. Why they labeled it that way, I really can't tell you. The reason I raise it, because that's a topic then that they haven't tested yet, if that label was, as I think, maybe improper. So don't ignore your juvenile delinquency, because I think it could show up. And then there on the, I think it was February 2015 exam, the family law question, they said had a little bit of dependency in it. I really didn't see a lot of dependency. Again, it's not my area of expertise, but it really wasn't screaming dependency. So those 2 haven't gotten full testing yet, and they would be the last 2 to really show up on the exam. So top of the list, Florida con law. And again, Judge Shepard will talk to you about the likely topics. I will too. But make sure you're prepared for that. Trusts, we're going to have a nice, good, juicy trust question we'll do later. And then from there, some combinations, and understanding that torts, contracts, property kind of mixed in with some stuff, possibly, and or maybe family law. Actually, family law would be kind of a middle-level bet for me, and for sure, rules of professional responsibility. Any question, which is, it's almost everything, isn't it? Ah, gee. That's what they want. They want to keep everybody off balance, so you study everything, which is hard. Reggie?
I think you answered about the security transaction and commercial paper. They probably be combined only with real property.
They're going to be contracts. Actually, is where they've shown up so far. But could they be combined with real property? Yes. Commercial paper, you know, if you're, it was a contracts question when they tested it. Somebody was buying and selling something and gave a note, and then the note was transferred, right? That's your commercial paper, negotiable instruments, which Professor Martin will talk to you about, negotiability is very likely how they'll test negotiable instruments, or commercial paper, I call it. And it's pretty simple. She's going to give you the rules for negotiation. She's got a whole, rubric. Those of you who've had her for class, you know how she presents stuff. Secured transactions, it's been contracts again, but it could easily be property, because you could have somebody with property that has a lien on it.
This subject could also be multiple choice.
Oh, could be, yeah, good point. Professor Martin has done a fair amount of research, and she says the other states that test secured transactions have tended to test it in essay form. But it's got a lot of rules based, and when you have something that's rule-based, it's testable in multiple choice form. So I wouldn't absolutely write off multiple choice for secured transactions. I don't think they're going to do that. I think it's going to be an essay component. But as I say, be flexible. If you walk into the exam and you see something that you weren't expecting, then just roll with it. That's what you have to do, and that's hard. But it is what's required with this exam. Other questions? All right, we're going to do contracts and torts today. You may not, how many of you have really looked at Florida torts? Probably not. A few of you have. Probably not yet, and that's okay, because part of what I'm doing is to alert you to some of the things you want to study. And unfortunately, because everybody's taking a different commercial course, I can't track your commercial courses. But we're going to start with contracts, because if you've looked at contracts, the Florida contracts distinctions are about that big. So it's a good place to start, because it's the one area, if you are writing an essay on Florida law, you want to make sure that you are talking about Florida law. But when it comes to contracts, there are very few things that are different Florida law versus the common law or Article 2. So it's a good place to start. So what I'm going to ask you to do now is take the contracts packet, flip all the way to the back. And the question is on the back. Flip it all the way over, or the last page, sorry. Sometimes it's on the back. Yeah, that one. The question should be at the very end. Yes. Okay, good. I want you to take about 10 minutes now to read the question and issue spot, make a little bit of an outline, and then we're going to come back and talk about what you found. Okay, folks. Thank you very much. Thank you. Again, I want to try to get, thanks very much. I want to try to get through as much as I can before the camera goes away, because there are some people who can't get here for various reasons, different parts of the state or whatever else, and they want to be able to watch the video. Now, before we go to torts, a couple of things announcement-wise, and I will do the drawing. Anybody not sign in, it's always important to sign on the list, even if you're taking the exam in July. Sign the list, okay? Yeah. Because we want to be able to send you updates if they have updates on anything, and keep you involved. So that's number one. Number two, remember tomorrow's class is the First Amendment only, but if you have other questions about con law, I'm sure Professor Kang will hang around afterwards. It starts at 1. He goes, as you all probably know, he goes very quickly. So this is going to be a short session. We'll be out of here probably before 2:30. And just so that you know, at his request, we're not recording it. He prefers not to be recorded. So if you want to hear Professor Kang, you need to come tomorrow to the session, and I would encourage you all to do exactly that. Announcement number 3, and then I'll do the drawing, just reminders, but next Friday is an important one, is commercial law. So it'll be primarily commercial paper and secured trans lecture from Professor Martin. So please, I'll make sure that you come to that one. Okay,
Next time.
next Friday, 3 o'clock, next Friday, same time, same place, right? Okay, I'm mixing these up. I'm gonna draw. I can't wait till tomorrow, and I can have somebody else draw.
I got the winning ticket, Professor, here.
Hold on to it for July, Andres, okay? Where's one? There's one.
Which one?
It's that one. Okay, so, same thing as before, make sure that you have documentation and check in with Sarah on your reimbursement, because that's how it works, it's reimbursement. Come tomorrow, and you get yet another chance. And as I mentioned before, remember, you guys are a relatively small group, because it's February, and so you have a lot of chances for the hotel room. All right, we're going to do the torts question, and as a heads up before we go into it, as I said, I realize that many of you have not studied Florida distinctions yet. There is a lot of detail in this particular question that you probably don't know unless you happen to have been working in that area or took a med mal class or something like that. Don't worry about that part of it. One of the main things I want to do is to get you spotting issues, and there are a couple of really important areas here that I want to highlight for you for study purposes, because the last torts question was products liability. They haven't done this type of question in a little while, and it's one of their favorites. So if you get a torts question, it could easily be structured like this one. So same thing, it's a short fact pattern, take a little bit of time, read it through, spot issues, and then we'll talk.